Hey there, so in today's video, we're going to talk about outcomes, what they are, and why they matter for your nonprofit. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, this is Tiffany with Boss on a Budget. I help people start their nonprofits and also raise money to finance and launch their nonprofits. And I'm here today to talk about outcomes. Now, I usually talk from the perspective of new nonprofits and startups, but this information that I'm sharing today will be helpful for any kind of nonprofit. And I'd also like to say that even though I talk a lot about startups in the nonprofit industry, I actually have quite a bit of experience in research and doing program evaluation. So I wanted to do this video because I really understand the importance of outcomes to communicate your impact as a nonprofit, and I want to share some tips about how to think about outcomes and why they matter for your particular organization. So in this video, I'm just going to answer two simple questions. What are outcomes and why are they important? So I'm going to give you a breakdown of what outcomes are and some tips of how to create outcomes for your programs. But I'm also going to give you 3 reasons why it's important to focus on outcomes. And what I want to share at the end of this video is just one simple tip to help you navigate this space, because I recognize that when you hear the word outcomes, your eyes probably glaze over. When you hear people talk about data or research, it can be intimidating. And so I have one tip at the end of the video to help avoid all of that. Okay, so let's get right into it. So what are outcomes? Let's keep this as simple as possible. An outcome is just basically a change in a behavior, a skill, a mindset, and some kind of knowledge. So an outcome is just a transformation or a change that you want to see as a result of something. So when you think about it in those simple terms, it can probably help you imagine or conceptualize how that relates to your nonprofit. Because the whole idea of your nonprofit is that you were created to address a problem. So if you were created to address a problem, then obviously there's a solution. And obviously if you put the solution in place, something happens, something changes. So the reason why you have outcomes is because you want to measure what happened and what changed. And the outcome is what you hope to change. It is the end result of what you hope to change. So when you're thinking about designing your program, you should always be thinking in those basic terms. What's the problem you're solving? What's the solution you're putting in place? And what's the change that happens? If you hear me talk about fundraising, if you hear me talk about grant writing, or just how to think about the design of your programs from the very beginning, you'll hear me often talk about the problem statement and the solution and the fact that your organization is the solution or part of the solution, and then the transformation that you want to communicate to your donors and funders. So if you think in those simple terms, just relate outcomes in that way. Outcomes are the end result of everything. So I'm going to give you a couple of pieces of advice when it comes to your outcomes. So first things first, you got to be able to structure the work that you do in programs so that you can think about, okay, what are the set of activities that are being done that are impacting the change? And that should be housed under what generally is referred to as a program. So if you have different programs under your organization, then for each program, it's my advice that you have at least 1 to 3 outcomes that you're tracking for every single program. Because the point of having a program is that you're putting something in place to change or impact something for the better. So you want to be able to have outcomes that speak to what you want to be better for every single program that you have in place. And one good exercise that you should actually do when you are designing your programs is to create a logic model. So I know a lot of you who are doing the direct work have not been in the research field, and you may have never heard of a logic model, but I want you guys to Google logic model and begin to learn for yourself what it means and how to set one up. I might actually just do a video on logic models, but I just didn't want to bore people to tears with that video. But a logic model is just basically a graphical representation of your program and the impacts that it's making. So it's a graphical representation of the point of it all. And so the usual headers are the inputs that you're putting in place, which are basically the resources you have in place for your programming. And then you talk about your activities. What do you actually do in the program? Then you talk about your outputs. Like, what are the service units? What are the number of services you provide? And then you go to your outcomes, which are short-term, mid-range, and then long-term, right? And so you put all of that on a paper, and it's like a map which shows the progression of your program. And then you can see the connections between all the different sections. So I like doing logic models because I can see that if my activities don't line up with my outcomes, then I have to go back to the drawing board and make sure that either the outcomes are rewritten or the activities change. And the reason why I'm saying that is sometimes we do a lot of things in a program and we're not sure why we're doing them or what impact that we want to make. And if you want to make sure that you use your resources as efficiently as possible, you want to make sure that everything that you do connects to your outcomes, because that's your bottom line. You want to show success because that connects to your mission. So it all connects. The whole point of you starting is to fulfill your mission, and your outcomes should be connected to your mission and your overall vision. And so all the activities you're doing should connect to those outcomes, which connect to your mission and connect to your vision. Do you see it? Like, are you getting it now? And I wish I had a graphical representation for you. I might try to put a picture on the screen so you can see it. And I'll also link to an example, but it's a really good way for you to connect the dots, and it helps you. It forces you actually to think about your outcomes and put them on paper. The other piece of advice I would just give you is that you want to be mindful of how you collect data. So whenever you're creating an outcome, that means you probably want to measure how successful it is, right? Because why would you create one if you can't measure if you like met the outcome or you reached the outcome, right? So you want to think about how to measure, and you don't want to create unrealistic outcomes that you could never possibly measure or you could never actually impact. For example, you may have a financial literacy program and one of your outcomes is to measure home ownership as a result of the program. But maybe your program is only for 2 weeks and you don't actually track people after, but you're saying that one of your outcomes is to increase home ownership. Well, how do you measure that? How do you even know you're impacting home ownership? Number one, if you're not even tracking the people, so you can't even connect the work that you do to home ownership. And two, like, are the activities that you're doing for 2 weeks actually going to move the needle to help people own their own homes? So the logic model forces you to write things on paper and say, like, is this realistic? Does this make sense? Does this connect? So first of all, have your logic model in place, but also be mindful of how you want to measure this information and make sure it's realistic, the outcomes that you put in place. So I actually have a logic model example and a guide to creating a logic model in my nonprofit startup workbook, along with a whole lot of other information, workbooks, things to help you launch in your first year. So if you're interested in purchasing that workbook, the link is below in the description box for you. So here are 3 reasons why you want to be thinking about outcomes, and even from an early stage in your nonprofit, you should be thinking about outcomes and outlining them for your organization. The first thing is you should want to know how you're successful and why you're successful. So when you're starting out and you're creating your mission, you make certain assumptions about the program that you're doing, especially if you're new to this and you're not sure exactly how successful you're going to be. So you got to make some assumptions about where your success will be, what you're actually impacting. And as you do the work, you may realize that, oh, we thought we would impact this, but we're actually impacting this. Or we thought we would impact this in this way, but it's actually in this way, so we need to tweak and adjust this way. It's important for you to know and have a baseline for what you want to measure, so you even understand what your program does, how your program is effective. Because when you go out there and you speak about your program, you want to speak in terms of the change you create. You don't want to just talk about what you do. You want to talk about the transformation. You want to talk about how people walk away differently from your program. And you can't really put that into words unless you're clear on what your outcomes are. Right? And also, when you talk about your organization and you talk in terms of your outcomes, you want people to be consistent. You want everybody to be able to talk in the same way about your organization. You don't want one board member out here talking about you help people get high school diplomas, and another one talking about, oh, you help people get cars, and it may not even be anything that you do, right? So you want to make sure also that you have a set of outcomes in place so everyone on your team and everyone internal to the organization knows what you're doing and what you hope to impact. And then when you communicate it, it's clear to your external folks what you do and how you impact your community. Which relates to my second point. You want to be able to articulate your impact to your donors and your funders. So I often teach about fundraising, specifically fundraising from the point of view of a person or organization that's starting from ground zero, right? And I often tell people when I'm training that other people who hear your story or hear about what you do, don't necessarily get fired up about a list of activities. It's important for people to know what you do and how you do it, yes, but they don't necessarily get fired up by hearing you rattle off the fact that you have this many programs, that you do this, you do this, you do this. What people really get excited about is when you can show that progression through your programming, like as a result of your activities, what happened, right? And when people see, like, when someone came to us, this is how they were, and when they left us, this is how they were. And that is powerful. If you can communicate that, right? And I hope I'm making sense. Like that, when I say this, I'm talking about the transformation, the change, the results. When you can communicate using language that focuses on the results, the language that focuses on the transformation, that's what gets people fired up. Because people get agitated when they know there's a problem and they know there's not a solution to it. But when you present your organization as a solution to a problem and you can actually show that you have results in addressing that problem, they get excited because people want things to be settled. People want things to be resolved. And you are positioning yourself as an answer in your community. And when people can rely on you to be the answer, they trust you. And when people trust you, y'all should know what I'm going to say next. They give. So this is all important. The reason why I wanted to talk about outcomes is because it absolutely relates to your success in terms of fundraising. And again, as I said before, it's important for you to know what you're impacting and how you're impacting it. So when you are launching your nonprofit and getting your name out there and trying to be more visible, you're using the language that focuses on the change, that focuses on the outcomes. And the last reason that you should be paying attention to outcomes is because if you are an organization that wants to scale, and when I use that word, I mean you want to have exponential growth. You want to go from one small level to a big level. So maybe you're making $200,000 and you want to be $1 million organization. So you want to scale. When you want to attract major donors, so that could be individuals who are giving tens and thousands up to hundreds of thousands, or organizations like foundations that are giving hundreds of thousands or up to the millions. You need to be able to show your impact. And one of the best ways to do that is to have numbers. And the numbers connect to your outcomes. So if you can say to a funder, we serve this many people and these are the outcomes, like this is the success that we saw. 90% of our participants reached this particular outcome that we were tracking or we were measuring. If you can show numbers like that, then that is very attractive to large funders. And this is like 2.0 stuff. This is kind of advanced level stuff, but I'm just going to throw it out there anyway. When you start advocating with your lawmakers, right, and you want things to change and you want to make government money available for certain programs and services because you want a piece of that pot so you can be able to use that money to serve your population, lawmakers, especially on certain sides of the aisle, want to see proof. They want to know that what, they're committing public dollars to has actually worked in the past. So it also is helpful for you to use your outcomes, your success, the data that you use to track your outcomes. It can be used as a tool to show lawmakers, hey, this works. You should be investing in this. We should be putting more public dollars to this. So I want to give you an example so I can make this plain. So when I worked at a national nonprofit research firm, we did a lot of program evaluation. And we did one particular program evaluation on a program called Wendy's Wonderful Kids. And many of you may know that my background is in child welfare, so foster care, adoption issues, child abuse and neglect. Wendy's Wonderful Kids is an adoption recruitment program, which is spearheaded by the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. Dave Thomas founded Wendy's, and the proceeds from a lot of Wendy's sales goes directly to Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. So they created a recruitment program to help get kids from foster care adopted out of foster care. Okay. And they participated in a massive national program evaluation, and I was on that team. And we did a program evaluation. We measured the success on different outcomes, and we found that the program was successful, right? Through the data, through our program evaluation and our research study, we found that the program was very successful at getting kids adopted. So as a result of that research, the foundation could then use it to leverage the money they were already getting to get more money, to say to other funders, look, our program works. It's proven now. So you can invest in making sure more organizations have access to our program. So they use it as a leveraging tool to get more funding and to increase the impact of their program, meaning they could have more recruiters across the country. And it's now referred to as like a standard, the gold standard in adoption and recruitment. And so I know some of this may be like, you may be like, I'm new, so this doesn't really apply to me, but I just want to give you something to aspire to. And I just wanted to show you why it's so important to pay attention to data and outcomes. Because when you want to start getting serious money, major donors and major funders really want to know more information about your impact. And if you're measuring the success of your outcomes, then that can be a tool you use to attract those donors and funders. So I promise at the end of the video, just to give you one tip, I'm going to be really quick. And this is the tip that I will give you when it comes to designing your outcomes. Keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate it. So you may feel like you have to create these really complicated or really sophisticated looking outcomes to show that you are a successful program or a professional program. But really what I want you to do is think about the person, right, who's receiving your services, or the thing, because you may not be serving people, the thing that gets your services. And how do you want them to feel? How do you want their life to be changed? How do you want things to be different when it comes to them in particular, right? And just write that down. And then when you write down and you see all of those changes, start framing those in what will be the end result as a result of your program. So you want young people to be able to be financially independent. Well, we got to break that down into something that's measurable, something that we can look back to and say we have data on that and we measured how well we did with that. So financial independence can be marked by them owning something, right? So an outcome could be that our participants have ownership of a car or own some sort of property by 12 months after they leave our program. I'm just making this up out of thin air, literally. This is not in my notes. Okay, so that's a measure of success for you. So you want to measure how many of your participants are able to achieve that outcome 12 months after your program, right? And then you can say, once you have that information, 90% achieved it or 85% achieved it, right? Then you can start putting numbers to these things, so you can start reporting them out to your donors and your funders, so it gives you credibility. So all I would say is just keep it simple and just start out with just writing. Don't feel the need to like force yourself to create the outcome language first. Just start writing about what the change you want to see, and then start drilling down and getting more specific, and make sure you have a time period on it, and make sure you have some way it can be measured. And then you have your outcomes. All right. So I hope this was helpful. If you need more information, make sure you check me out at bossonabudget.com. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.